We have indeed, James, and isn't this spectacular? There is the little prince sitting atop a treehouse dam wall. So little Husana, whose tracks I found just after we last were with you, and his were going north. So it seems like him and Shongile were together, and Shongile's tracks headed back towards Twin Dams, and his came north up Weaver's Nest, and I was pretty sure that he might head this way. So we came towards to Treehouse Dam, and look at that, he's lying right out in the open, just surveying his territory and watching over his waterhole. He loves this particular area. I've seen Hosana here countless times. He loves to sit atop the dam wall and watch what goes on at the waterhole, and there's lots of terrapins and varying other things that occupy his mind here, and so it's a good place for him to come and see. It's also a place where Karula used to bring them quite often, and so he's quite at home with being in this area. But it is such a sight to see him in this beautiful early morning light, and he's just sitting there looking ever so regal. Isn't he getting massive as well? Look at the size of his head and his neck these days. He's getting huge. When we first came down, I thought it might be an adult female, but he's already gotten much bigger. Such a beautiful cat. And he's looking so healthy. I'm very, very impressed. He's obviously completely unscathed from his little encounter with Tingana the other night. So for those of you who aren't aware, he had an impala kill close to Vuatela camp. And Tingana came in, and there was a bit of a scuffle, I believe, and there was sort of sounds of them getting into an argument. But he looks absolutely fine. He's got a very healthy coat. There's no signs of any scratches or scars or cuts anywhere around there. So he's looking spectacular at this stage. Look at that coat. He's got such a rich golden coat. You'd often find this with male leopards, is that they'll end up getting a much more sort of gold color than what the females do. The females are often a little bit lighter, but his coat in this morning light is exquisite. Now, I believe a lot of you are very happy to see little Hosana, and I am too. It's been a while since I've seen him, and he looks incredible. He's looking much bigger than when the last time I saw him. So really, really glad that we've managed to find him, and hopefully we'll be able to spend most of the morning with him. I would imagine as that sun now starts to rise, it's going to get warm on his back, and that might get him up and moving, and maybe we'll see him trying to hunt some terrapins around Treehouse Dam. But it promises to be such a good morning, and I'm so excited that we managed to find him. I was saying to Senzo, there's leopard tracks everywhere this morning, and they've been walking up and down, and so it's nice that we actually were able to find him and got lucky that he was sitting right out in the open, and he is posing beautifully. Now, I think I might just reposition just now. The problem is the sun is behind him, so if we go down towards the water, it's going to be difficult to be able to actually see him. But we're going to try and see if I can't get a better view so we can actually see his face. Oh, hello, Hosana. Good morning. Isn't he beautiful? You're looking a bit dopey this morning, my boy. But he is getting so big, and he's got that typical sort of Karula male offspring look. They all look quite similar to me. So Mishu and Duna, Shavambala and Quarantine, Kunuma, they've all got that very kind of boxy face. Absolutely beautiful. Now, we are going to spend most of the morning, like I said, with this male leopard and see what he gets up to. And while we do that, I believe Jamie's got something slightly more delicate to show all of you. So Hosana isn't that beautiful? He's being backlit by this early morning rising sun, and the grass is catching all of that light and the edge of his coat, and he looks so beautiful up on this dam wall. It's such a nice image watching him, just watching and seeing what's going on. Now, he has stood up and he's looking around, so I don't think he's going to be there for too much longer. He might give us a big yawn. Well, what have you seen, Hosana? Seems like he's going into a bit of a stalk mode. You can see he's very interested in something. His ears have perked forward, his head is lowered slightly, and he's looking as though he's a lot more aware of something. I wonder if maybe there isn't something that's approaching the waterhole. You sometimes will find at this time of the day that some of the animals like impalas and kudu will come and have an early morning drink, and I wonder if maybe one of them is not on its way that he's noticed, because he's definitely gone into a sort of stalking posture where he's watching very carefully. See, look, he's now slinking off. Oh, no, big yawn. Full image with the light coming through the grass. Amazing. Hello, my boy. He's looking so good. And look, his tummy looks quite full as well. He doesn't look as though he's too skinny. So he's definitely taken to being a solitary cat very, very well. Now we are going to try and reposition because he's gone behind us and through a big thick bush. I wonder where he's off to, because this is exactly the same way he got here. He walked in the exact same route. So I think maybe he's going to head now down towards Twin Dams. So let's see. He's busy bounding away through the long grass, as Hosana often does. Now it's quite interesting that every time that I've seen him here and he comes this way, he takes this little shortcut and then he's going to pop out in front of us. And this is where we had him the other day, where he was stalking that scrub hare and he got so close to the scrub hare and ended up missing it. I don't know why he actually didn't even jump towards the scrub hare. It was so close, but he ended up kind of fluffing it and missing the scrub hare. But it's the same exact movement that he makes. Now, lost him here somewhere, but he must be close by. There he is. Where are you going, Husana? Now, while we try and keep up with this leopard and see where he goes to, go back across to James and see what his plans are for the morning and see whether or not he's had any luck finding a spotted or rather large cat, for that matter. He is indeed. He's just come up onto a little fallen log and he is posing perfectly. And he's busy scratching, getting those claws nice and sharp, generally being a little hooligan. And now back into the long grass we go. So every now and then he's giving us these beautiful visuals where he jumps up onto something, and other than that he seems to be moving quite quickly through the grass. And it's been interesting to watch him, because Hosana is probably one of the most relaxed leopards that I've dealt with as a small young male, and generally young males can be quite shy, but this morning seems a little bit sort of wary. He's walking quite quickly away from the vehicle when it starts, and then he starts to kind of calm down once it follows him for a little bit, but he's showing sort of more and more that he's aware of the fact that he's now under sort of threat, that mom is not around. You can see that he's a little bit more wary of what's going on around him, and that's probably because of that incident he had with Tingana. He knows now that Tingana is starting to see him in a bit of a different light. It's no longer sort of this male leopard that's tolerant of his presence. He's now getting into a situation where Tingana is starting to see him as more of a threat, and so that's why he'll be a little bit more cautious about what's going on and keep his distance from certain things like the vehicles, just in case they come out. Now I'm going to try and see if we can't find a better place, because he's gone behind a tree there, as you can see. Let's just try to see if we can't position ourselves slightly better. But that was very nice of him to go on this big fallen log here. It was perfect place with that morning sunshine on his golden coat. So special. Now I'm hoping, because we are moving slowly in a southeasterly direction, it would be nice if he joins up with Shongile. Just going to try and negotiate this big thicket. So you can see he's a little bit kind of wary. He keeps trotting off a little bit as we get sort of alongside him, which means he's kind of a little bit nervous of the car at this stage. I don't want to push him too much. I'm just going to give him a bit of space and see where he goes to. He's just gone behind this little tree area here. There you can see him through the thicket. I wonder where he's going to head from here. I was hoping that he was going to head a little bit more sort of east of where we are and maybe try and see if he finds little Shongile. It would be nice to see the two of them together again. But I don't think he actually knows where he wants to go. He's kind of trotting about everywhere and he's looking into all the trees, and I think he's going to settle there. So let's try and see if we can't get ourselves into a place where we can actually see him. So Kim, you're wondering if Hosana would be making big kills yet? Well, yes indeed. He killed an impala a few days ago close to Vuyatela camp, and then he's also, we know, it's killed 1 or 2 impalas in Little Gowrie, so he's made quite a number of kills at this stage, and so he's just fine. He'll be making quite large kills. I believe the one kill that he made in Little Gowrie was an adult male impala, so that's very good for him. And if he's already started to get this technique where he's catching impalas, he's going to be just fine. So he's big and strong enough now to pull down those sort of sized animals, in comparison to Shongile, who's still a little bit smaller. She struggles a bit to be able to pull down something of that size. So he is just fine, and you can see he looks in perfect condition. He's been without his mom now for over 2 months, and yet he's still perfect. He's got healthy body mass. He's not in any way skinny. You can see his neck is growing, so he's doing just fine. Like I say, he's taken to this single life and looking after himself like a duck to water, and he's done really, really well. So it's good to see that his mom obviously taught him very well. So, dear watcher, you're wondering how much longer until he mates? Well, that's dependent on where he ends up and how life goes for Hosana. If he gets pushed out of this area and ends up being a nomadic male for a while, he can go until even 6-7 years old before he's able to mate. But if we look at sort of Quarantine and Kunuma and Shivambalana, they all sort of managed to get a territory fairly young, and we're already mating by about 4.5-5 years. So he's still got quite a while to go. You must remember that Hosana now is only about, I think it's about just over 16 months, 17 months, I forget where we are now, we're in May, so 17 months. So he's still a young male. He's still got probably about 2 years to go before he's actually big enough to start challenging and take over any mating rights. So it's not going to be any time soon, but we will see where he ends up and how he ends up going, and whether or not he can find himself a territory in this area that he is able to settle quite quickly, or if he's going to have to be quite nomadic and end up quite far away. Now we're going to try and see if I can't reposition so we can see his face without all these big grass stalks. And while we do that, I believe James has got something else that is glistening in the sunshine that he would like to show you. Well, we haven't seen him get anywhere near anything just yet. He is definitely watching and listening and looking around, but so far no luck for little Hosana. He's got no meal to show for anything. He's been chased around by a few birds, and you can hear the rollers are squeaking at him, and a few francolins have shouted at him, but other than that, he's been, and now the hornbills are also going. But other than that, he's just been sort of very circumspect, and he's been walking around and listening and looking and smelling and just trying to kind of see what's going on around him. He hasn't really bumped into anything of substance, and so I'm sure as time goes and he starts to find what he's looking for, if he sees maybe some impalas or a duiker or something like that, then he will definitely start going into a lot more of a hunting mode. Earlier he was trying to stalk some francolins, but got hopelessly nowhere near them. They were far and they saw him, and lots of squawking and squeaking as he bounded after them, but really had no shot. But you can see how difficult they can be to find. Look at that camouflage there. Absolutely amazing. So Douglas, you're wondering how good a leopard's eyesight is. Well, it's very good. It's much like us. They have binocular vision, so the eyes are in the front of the head, and they have very large eyes, so they're able to pull in a lot of light, which means that they see very, very well at night, and their eyesight is definitely better than what ours is. So they don't see in nearly the same spectrum of colors though, because they've sacrificed cells in their eyes to be able to see better at night. So we have two types of cells in our eyes. We have rods and cones are the color cells, so those are the cells that will pick up color, and the rods are light cells. And so as these animals move, well, these leopards and us, and we have sort of balances of the two. With leopards and lions, they tend to have very, very, very few cone cells, and that ends up with them being able to see much better at night, but not so well. Not so well in terms of color. Now we're going to try and see if we can't find a better place to park. As you can see, it's quite dense and thick behind me here, and while we do that, let's go and see what James is up to with some rather large aquatic animals. So we're just trying to crash through the bush a little bit to try and catch up with Husana, who's now run up onto a termite mound. So he's found himself a beautiful spot with beautiful morning light, and it really is a spectacular scene to see him up on his termite mound. So there he is, and he's still now facing south of us, and I'm sure that's because there were impalas that were alarm calling just to the south of us, and we had Shongile's tracks a little bit earlier right where we are now, so I wonder if she's not around here as well. Wouldn't it be fantastic to see the two of them come together? But isn't that beautiful? In amongst the long grass of the termite mound, he just looks so elegant up there. You can see he's watching the comings and goings of some of the other vehicles and just seeing what's happening. Now I'm quite surprised. He walked straight past a male impala. He didn't even blink at it. I don't know if he spotted it, but he seems to be more enthralled with these impalas that were alarm calling south of us. So I wonder if he knows that there's maybe something else afoot, and maybe another leopard is close by and in this area, and that's why he's kind of checking around and seeing and facing in that direction. You can see his ears are moving around quite a bit. He's trying to work out exactly what's going on and whether or not it would be safe for him to head in that area. Now, like I say, the tracks that I did have were for a female leopard, which would have been pretty much, I'm sure, for Shongile. They were small tracks, so I'm sure it's his sister that's been causing the noise to be made. Isn't he beautiful? Up on his mound. You're looking very regal, my boy. You're starting to grow and fit into those ears and paws and body. And I was looking at his tracks just now when we were crossing the road, because often with tracks and tracking, we find tracks fairly regularly, and it's difficult to know exactly who it is, unless you can actually see them putting their foot down and you then look at the track quite carefully. And he's just seeing how big his foot actually is. It's quite amazing. It's not too far behind Tingana these days. He still doesn't quite have the same size foot, but he's getting there. It's definitely gotten much bigger, and his tracks do now resemble a male leopard rather than a sort of big female. So Kirk, he's in Tingana's territory. That's where he moves around. Tingana was what we think fathered these cubs, and so he moves around within that territory, because when he was a tiny cub, this would have been where Karula hung around, and Tingana would have made sure that he protected this area so that these cubs would be protected. So that's where he is now. We do sometimes find that Mvula will move around in these areas, but he's no longer really a territorial male. He's now nomadic, so it's more Tingana's territory than anything else. And Hosana hasn't drifted outside of that yet. We've only really seen him around these sort of natal areas where he was born. He hasn't started making any sort of progress and moving out and around and into other areas, and that's very, very important that he doesn't, because at the age that he is, he can't defend himself against a really big male. He doesn't have the techniques, he doesn't have the experience, he also just doesn't have the size, and so he needs to stay in this area where kind of Tingana knows him and won't see him as too much of a threat just yet, but will still sort of provide some sort of protection by being able to push other leopards away, and Hosana can then fly under the radar. And that's why you'll find that he won't vocalize, he won't scent mark. If he does urinate, it will just be in a bush somewhere. He's not going to actually use his back legs and actually scrape and urinate like that. So he's going to try and fly under the radar as much as possible until he gets a little bit older, until he gets to about 4 or 5 years old, and that's when he'll start to then actually push for dominance and mating. But isn't that beautiful with all the grass? Absolutely amazing. So Dana, you're wondering if he's always had that little notch in the top of his ear. Well, Dana, I'm actually not sure. I was just looking at that myself and wondering the same thing. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of viewers out there that will definitely know, so if you do know, hashtag Safari Live, and you can help us out and let us know if Hosana's always had his little notch in his left ear. And it's interesting because it doesn't look like a cut or anything like that. It just looks like the shape of the ear is slightly different on the edge there. You can see it looks like there's a little piece missing out that's quite old. That's definitely healed. So yes, it must have been there for a while. It's definitely not something that's very new. But I've actually never noticed it before. I was just looking at the exact same thing in that shot and wondering whether or not that notch is new or not. But now that I can see with the ear kind of moving towards us, you can see there's no sort of fresh sign of blood or scabbing. So I would imagine that's quite an old nick and has been there for quite some time. But you can see how he's watching around. From where he is now, he's got the perfect sort of vantage point to see what's going on. He's on a very tall termite mound, and from up there he'll be able to watch over this area and to see if there's any sign of potential prey animals or any other leopards that could be moving around. And you can see now he's going back down, and I wonder if he hasn't spotted that male impala that I was referring to earlier. I think maybe he missed it because he's looking in the same direction where that male impala was and is now heading back the way he came. So I wonder if he's not going to maybe try and head in that direction, although it seems like he's now changed again and going around the side of the mound. Might be a bit hot on top there. The sun has come out and it is starting to get a little bit warm. So maybe he's going to try and see if he can't find some shade. So I think what we'll try to do is try and just see if we can't move and find ourselves a better position. I'm just Just trying to see which way he goes, because I can see some grass moving. Oh, he's back on top of his mount. What are you doing, Hosana? Maybe he just decided to go on a walkabout of the mound and just explore this sort of castle that he's on. He's back exactly where he started again. I wonder if he wasn't trying to find a place to lie down in the shade and there just wasn't a comfy spot down further down, and he's now going to find somewhere else to lie and show us his bum. So I'm going to just move so that we can actually see something other than his spotted little tail. Now, while we try and reposition and get ourselves into a more friendly place, I believe Jamie's still out and about and on foot and looking around for all the small things. So let's go see where she is and what she's doing. Well, Jamie, he's now found himself a beautiful termite mound to just lie and watch the world go by. And he's looking ever. So I think that Shungile might be on her way back this way, and maybe that's why he's lying on top of this mound and just watching what's going on, maybe trying to see whether this is indeed his sister or maybe a different leopard that could be approaching. So he's found himself the perfect place. Now, Jamie is saying she's going to be tracking elephants. Well, she was the elephant whisperer yesterday, so I'm hoping that she will be able to find them. I saw quite fresh tracks around Treehouse Dam area as well, heading sort of northward, so maybe those are the same tracks that she's on and she'll have some luck finding them. But isn't that beautiful? So you can see he's starting to get a little bit sleepy now. His eyes are starting to close, and it's this typical sort of winter phase that we go through with cats. They often are like this. They move around in the early hours of the morning, and then as that sun starts to get warm, they tend to lie and just kind of absorb a bit of warmth and sunshine before they then start finding some shade. And you'll often find the cats on top of mounds like this, just watching. But he is so, so beautiful. He's got the most amazing eyes and face. So, Megan, this is a question that I've been asked many times throughout my guiding career, and it's whether or not Hosana or an individual leopard would recognize our voices or our smells. Well, I would imagine that they definitely recognize some of the sounds that we make. I don't know if they recognize each individual as a sort of different entity, but I would imagine with the sense of hearing that they have, that they would be able to differentiate between all of our voices and know that certain voices are certain individuals. But the thing is that if you look at Hosana, the first time I ever saw him, he would never have known who I was, but yet his sort of demeanor was still the same. So he didn't react any differently to me as he would to, well, me the first time as he does to me now after spending quite a bit of time with him. So I think they do recognize the sort of smells and the sounds associated with vehicles, but whether they differentiate that from each individual is debatable. It's possible, and given that their senses are so good, I would imagine that they can, but they seem to not show too many different reactions to different people. I've watched Hosana and I've seen now 3 different vehicles coming in, and his behavior hasn't really changed across those 3 different vehicles, and it's not like he's drifted closer to any sort of in particular person. So I would imagine that they can kind of differentiate, but they don't sort of apply a different behavior around that unless somebody's done something really negative to them. So if, let's say, I had to drive now up into the mound and chase him and do all of those kind of things, then I think over time he would be able to recognize my sort of voice and the sound of Jigger, and he would know that that's something he needs to be scared of. But nowadays, in his lifetime, he's been treated with respect by multiple guides, and so he's pretty relaxed with vehicles and the sounds of most of the voices that he hears. It's interesting though, because if we sort of apply it to other animals, there used to be a rhino in this area called Skewhorn, and he used to have a particular hatred for one guide, and nobody knew why. And this guide, I asked him, did you ever have a sort of time where you chased him or anything like that? And he said no. But this time, every single time that guide would come down the road and his voice would be heard, that rhino would come charging straight towards him and try and horn his vehicle. And with all the other guides, he was very relaxed. You would be able to spend lots of time. But with that particular guide, he used to get such trouble from that individual. So there must be a case of these animals recognizing something in us and our voices, and knowing that that was a particularly sort of person that maybe in some stage had chased that rhino or had done something to cause that response. So I think they're a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. So I would imagine that they do recognize us, but whether or not they apply a different behavior is still very much a debatable situation. But although Hosana is still intent on watching, I wonder if he's not watching that male impala. Like I said earlier, there wasn't a male impala that was just off to our western side, and it seems like he's kind of watching in that direction. Maybe he's hoping that that male impala will get closer. The nice thing about being up on a mound like this, especially a very grassy mound, is that he's going to be quite well camouflaged from up there. And if something like an impala came close, he would be able to then get right down and drop his head, and he would be very difficult to see him. That, coupled with the fact that there is a slight breeze that is blowing this morning, and so being up on the mound means that he would be able to stay out of that sort of wind that would be drifting towards the impala, and so it would be a little bit higher than where the impala is, and the impala then shouldn't actually pick up his scent, and he'll be able to then stalk from up there. So it's a good place for him to be. Not only can he see what's going on around him, but he can also pick up if the animal does come close. It's a good place to launch an attack from. But isn't he beautiful? Look at that. It's amazing when he kind of looks around to us and you lock eyes with him. It's such a special feeling. So Adele in the UK, you're wondering if there are any other specific markings that we can use to identify Hosana. Now, for me, Hosana has just a face that I recognize. He's got that sort of pink and black nose, which will change, and we've got that nick out of the left ear. And I know he's got 3 spots on his right cheek. I'm not sure about his left, so I'm sure some of the viewers out there will be able to help us with his spot pattern on the left side. It's funny because for us, I don't often look at markings because we often see these leopards enough that it's almost like when you see your dog, you just know who it is. And so it's like that for me anyway. I know some of the other guides it's a bit different and they'll use spot patterns, but for me it's just kind of the general look of the animal, the size, the area that we're in, and certain facial features that will tell me who it is. And Hosana's kind of got that very boxed face for me, and he's got that little pink nose and rather large ears, and there's really no other young male leopard that would hang around in this area at the moment, and that's what I use. But there definitely will be key identifying features, and I know a lot of the viewers out there spend a lot of time putting together all the ID kits and showing us all the different markings that they have. I know there's some that do it with the hyenas as well, so I'm pretty sure that someone will be able to help us and tell us exactly what they use as a key IDing feature and what spots they like to use to identify Hosana. But most of the time when we do sort of IDs of leopards and you use spot patterns, you mostly use the little spots above the whiskers. So right now those are obscured by the grass, but there are a line of spots that sit just above the whisker line. And on each side there will be a different number of them, and on each individual they'll be in a different place. And so that's probably one of the best ways to ID leopards. So you'll sometimes hear people saying that the leopard's got a 3-2 spot pattern, which would basically mean that it would have 3 spots on its right side of its face and 2 spots on its left side of its face. And so with Hosana you can see very clearly those 3 spots now. Oh, he's now turned his head away again, and that grass is interfering with this whole exercise. But he basically has 3 that come from the nose above the whisker line, and then on the left side he would have a certain number of spots, and each of those will be arranged differently to any other animal out here, and that would be a way that you can ID them. Also use markings around the eye area and the cheek. So, White Lady Ian, you say that he's got a ebony necklace, and I didn't catch the other part. Alice, you said something about under his eyes, but I couldn't catch something about a football. So, football player charcoal under his eye. So, basically those dark black markings under his eye, and then a very, very, very distinct black necklace that comes around his chest area. So those are the ones that you use to identify him, which I can see. The thing about the black underneath the eyes is that that's a tough one to use, because I have seen Tamba, who is the son of Tundi, another female that we see in this area, and he's also got very sort of dark liners under his eyes. But if that coupled with the sort of nick out of the ear and the 3 spots, then yes, I can see how you can use that for Hosana, so that's a fair enough call. I'm sure there are others. Everybody seems to have their own sort of way of doing it, and some will recognize certain spots better than others, so I'm sure there are other spots that he's got that make it only Hosana. Right, so we're going to stick with Hosana because he's now coming down his mound and seems like he's going to carry on. And while we try and catch up with him and see what he's potentially going to go and look for, I believe James Hendry's got something that Hosana would love to be seeing right here. This is the beautiful Hosana, who is just sitting and found himself a nice bit of shade now, and I think that's him for the day. I think he's going to decide this is where he's going to rest for now. And so the butterfly has got the perfect view of a male leopard close to him. Now hopefully Hosana doesn't jump on that butterfly, because that will ruin that butterfly's day, but otherwise he is looking very, very, very sleepy indeed. I think that's the end. And I was wondering what he was going to get up to, because where he's sitting now, unfortunately it's very difficult to see from where we are, but there is a termite mound that is covered in dwarf mongoose, and they're all sitting sunning themselves, and I'm sure Hosana could have seen them, but I think he's just not interested now. It's gotten quite warm. He's been moving around most of the morning, so I think it's time for him to rest. Try again a little bit later in terms of hunting. I don't think he's going to be doing any of that anytime soon. But it's amazing how he's found himself a little shady spot. I think earlier when he was on top of the mound, he came down to try and lie down, and there wasn't any shade that he was comfortable in, and that's why he went back onto the top of the mound. Now he's sort of waited it out, and that shadow would have stretched slightly, and he's now got himself the perfect place to spend the morning at least. As soon as the afternoon comes, he's going to be slap bang in the middle of the sun, but the morning it will be nice and cool up against that termite mound. You can see those eyes are starting to shut, and then you'll find the head will start to droop and nod a little bit, and will then drop down. What is interesting is you can see how the ears are still moving though, so even though his eyes are closed and he's going into a period now where he's going to start resting, he still is very aware of his environment, and his ears are still working constantly to hear what's going on around him. And you can see every now and then he does flick his ears, and those are those biting flies that are coming out. You can see them sort of hovering about his face on the right hand side there. So those will be driving him a little bit crazy, and once he lies down, hopefully they'll ease up and leave him alone and go find another victim to go and worry. Hopefully it won't be us, because a biting fly is a horrible little insect. It's really is quite irritating. They sort of hover around your face, and then they land on you and they nip you, and it's sort of this slight stinging sensation. It really is quite horrid. So, well then, you want to know how long do leopards rest in a day? Well, it depends on the individuals, but most of the time you'll find that most leopards will rest for probably, I would say, at least 12 hours of a day. They're not quite as lazy as what the lions are. The lions can go up to about 20 hours a day, but leopards you'll find are actually quite active animals. They move around even in the heat of the day. They move around at night, but their sort of peak times that they move around is around sunset and sunrise, and there will be a period of rest in between. So I'd probably say at most you'll find a leopard sleeping maybe 12 hours a day. Other than that, they are moving around and kind of seeing what's happening and finding the food that they need. Now just sniffing the breeze a little bit. You can see there's a bit of a rustle in the grass now from the wind, and that will carry little scent particles that he can pick up. So you'll find every now and then he just lifts his nose and smells, but he's definitely getting very sleepy. Those eyes are starting to droop heavily now, and I reckon he's not long for this. Well, he's going to do a bit of daydreaming and going to lie down and have a really good rest for the hot part of the day. I think it's going to be one of those days. It's going to be very warm. The sun already feels very hot on our backs, so I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a warm day and a perfect day if you're a male leopard to find some shade and sleep. Now, I think what we're going to probably do is carry on and leave Hosana to his nap. There's some other vehicles that do want to come into this area, and so while we do that, I believe Jamie is playing about with trees.
We have indeed had some luck. We've got some moving grass on top of a termite mound. That is Hosana, sneaking round, having a look at us. Can you see him from that side, Herbie? Let's just go, Ferg, let's just go around ever so slightly. Obviously we're not going to scare him, and we're not going to stay for too long. It's the last opportunity that we're going to have to do this. One of my last opportunities. Keep going, Ferg. There he is. Hello, my boy. Hey, I'm going to miss this. Gonna miss you? Yes, little one. I'm glad that when I do leave, I'll know that he's healthy, happy, and more than capable of looking after himself. And he won't stay this comfortable and relaxed. I mean, we're less than 10 meters away from him. And you never ever get to do that with a wild leopard except here. With these special cubs. It really is an absolute privilege. Hey, my man. You look after yourself, huh? Not that I'm not leaving just yet, but this might be the very last opportunity I get to spend any time with him on foot. Who knows what may happen in the next 3 weeks. Taking this opportunity is special. You're so invisible. Yes, you are. We can't see you. Promise. It's okay, little man. Sweet. These are the leopard cubs that have given me the most amazing opportunities to spend with them on foot. It's really very special. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave now. That's all. I just wanted to say hello and bye-bye to him on foot, in case the opportunity doesn't present itself in the future. I'm sure I'll see him again on drive before I leave, and we'll be back, of course. But things won't be the same. They won't ever be the same as they have been now with Shongile and Hosana. Two special little leopards. We are close. We're very close. I don't want to push it too much. And I don't want to make him feel like he has to move. Yeah, my beautiful little boy. So as soon as we finish the end of the sunrise safari, then we'll head off. Hopefully James or Tristan will give us a lift home. But this is definitely the best ever ending. I can't believe how invisible he is. Flat up against that termite mound. With skills like that, I think Hosana is going to be absolutely fine. The ability to hide. There really is not another place in the world you can do this with a leopard. And certainly not that many leopards even here. Tingana's not the same. But Karula, well, we've been lucky with her and we've been lucky with her cubs. Oh, on that note, it is time for us to start heading for breakfast. I can hear my stomach rumbling, and perhaps, unless Hosana is going to provide me with some bacon and eggs, I think it's time for us to head home. So a big thank you to Ferg for his wonderful camera work. I'm sorry I walked you all over the reserve.
Really enjoyed it.
I did too. And then a very special thank you to Alice and to Megan in Final Control. And most importantly, a big thank you to all of you for joining us on the Sunrise Safari. What I'm going to do for the last 20 seconds, I'm going to duck in front of you. I'm going to see if we can give you one last view. He's so hidden. All right, we'll follow up with him on the Sunset Safari, everybody. But until we see you then, there's a twitching ear. Have a wonderful day.